right, good morning, everyone. Welcome to our stakeholder planning session. We're excited to spend this time with you this morning so we can have a productive discussion about our impact fee program. I'm Jackie Forbes from Kane County Division of Transportation. I'm the Chief of Planning and Programming and leading our efforts in this impact fee update. Joined with me this morning is also Lisa Larson, our impact fee coordinator. For anyone who's worked with Jerry Dixon in the past, he has retired as of last month. So Lisa has taken over the reins and you will be hearing from her a little bit more. We also have Jennifer Becker, our Deputy Chief of Staff from Kane County Division of Transportation, who's also working on this project with us. I'm going to hand it over to Rory Fankler-Split from Kimley Horn and Associates. She's going to introduce her team and get us started. Thank you.
Thanks, Jackie. My name is Rory Fankler-Split. I am a planner with Kimley Horn. I've been with Kimley Horn for 5 years, and prior to that was actually a municipal planner for the city of Naperville for 8 years. With me today, we have Tim Sjogren, who I think many of you know, and Jeff Whitaker, who's actually joining us from our Texas office. You'll hear from Jeff in a few minutes. Jeff actually does impact fee programs throughout the country. So he is joining us today to share a little bit about his national expertise and best practices of what we've learned from doing similar projects around the country. So with that, unless Tim or Jeff, you want to chime in with anything? Okay, then we'll jump right in. We've got a lot to cover today. The goal of this meeting, this is a meeting, as you all know, we've initiated, or maybe some of you don't know, we've initiated the update to the Kane County Impact Fee Program. Out of all of the meetings, this is the one meeting we would love to have in person. We appreciate you joining us virtually today. The goal is for this to be a discussion. This is a really important meeting in our update process. It's an opportunity to hear what is working well from you all, and also to hear what isn't working well and what we should be taking a look at as a part of this update. So we are going to try our best for us to do as little talking as possible and to create some space for you to share your experience with the impact fee program and provide some input on what we should be looking at as a part of the update. So we'll talk, we did, as you know, Jackie had shared a survey in advance of today's meeting. The goal of that survey was just to try to understand your experience with the program to date. We understand that there are varying perspectives on this call. We have representatives from the development community, as well as staff from various municipalities in the county and economic development representatives. Each of you has a different experience and a different perspective. So we're going to try to, again, understand from your experience what's working well. And I think it's important for us all to hear from those various perspectives, you know, how you've used the program. But with an understanding that you each have a different experience, we are going to go through and just kind of talk high level how the program works today. And if there are questions, chime in.
This is Mike.
If there are questions, chime in. Again, this is a discussion, and then we'll hear from Jeff on best practices and get some input from you all on that, and then talk a little bit about the program as a whole. So we'll jump right in. A quick overview. The goals of the Road Impact Fee Program are defined by the state statute. The overall goal is to promote orderly economic growth by assuring that new development has its fair share of the cost of new trips or new impact to the area roadway network. Through the program, existing and future roadway conditions are evaluated in order to identify deficiencies in the roadway network and define new improvements to address those deficiencies. For each eligible improvement that's identified, cost estimates are prepared based on the scope of the project. It's important to note that the impact fees are used to supplement other funding sources. This is not the sole funding source for all transportation improvements in the county. And ultimately,
Watching this county thing.
based on the analysis of where an equitable cost share is established. I'm gonna just quickly mute a couple. If you'd like to speak, obviously, you'll have to come off mute. We've put everyone, I think, on mute for the time being, but feel free to chime in. I guess to start, we're going to do some polling as a part of this. I've missed a poll. We want to first ask you to introduce yourself. So there should be a poll on your screen if you could let us know if you are a representative from the municipalities, economic development, or developer, or other. Before we ask some questions, it'd be helpful to understand your perspective. All right, we'll share the results. So it looks like most of those on the call this morning, 64% are from the municipalities. Thank you for making time this morning. We do have a couple of economic development representatives and a couple that have answered other. For those that have answered other, would you mind chiming in and letting us know where you're joining us from today?
Fox Valley Real Estate Association.
Great.
I'm on the Government Affairs Committee.
Thank you. Thank you for being here.
Consulting engineer.
Great. Anyone else? Okay. And then we have one more question. So based on our overview of the road impact fee goals, just curious to get some input on how familiar you are with the impact fee program. Good. It looks like we've got a nice range. So a little bit of a nice range of some that have a lot of experience and some who have some experience. So that will be good. We'll try to skip through the overview. That helps us understand how much background information to share today. So thank you. Oops. Quickly wanted to just highlight again that the impact fee is one funding source. King County has used impact fees for a number of projects throughout the county. Since the program's inception, it has generated over $43 million. The projects on the screen before you are just a couple of improvement highlights that have been completed using impact fee funding. A quick note that all impact fees must be used for improvements to county highways, which may include the expansion, enlargement, or construction of roads or associated infrastructure such as bridges. Impact fees cannot be applied to transit and pedestrian and bicycle improvements. However, those features are included in the roadway improvement. Just a different funding source is used for the multimodal elements. A quick overview of the current fee structure. New development in King County is required to pay an impact fee. Fees are assessed for residential development based on new dwelling units. Additions or modifications to existing dwelling units do not typically generate additional traffic and therefore are not required to pay an impact fee. For non-residential buildings, impact fees are required for construction of new buildings or additions to existing buildings. Exceptions are granted where this space is not expected to generate new traffic. And currently, non-residential development is assessed a fee based on the square footage. The impact fee program does define exempt uses, again, additions, modifications to existing dwelling units. in some cases, accessory buildings, rehabilitation of destroyed buildings, publicly owned schools, temporary structures, affordable housing. There is a relatively long list of exemptions in the ordinance. For certain projects, typically you'll see this for large multi-use developments or industrial developments next to interstates. It may be more appropriate to complete a detailed analysis of traffic patterns and circulation and development of an alternate fee through what is known as an individual assessment. High level, the process is an application fee is filed. King County staff reviews the application for completeness and will either issue a deficiency notice if there's missing information, or the fee will be assessed, and county staff reviews the proposed development, takes a look at that impact fee schedule, where it is. The county is currently divided into 3 impact fee service areas, and then applies the appropriate impact fee multiplier based on the time of the application. Quick overview of land use categories. The fees are assessed based on the land use. This list has evolved over time. As a part of the last update, the land use category flex industrial was added. Curious, we know from our experience working in the program, curious for the group's kind of discussion on your experience with the land use categories and impact fee calculation. The land use categories are obviously summarized. They don't capture all of the nuances of every single development. And if you were to look around you, trying to come up with a list that captures every single development would result in a very long list. So that's not the intent of the land use categories. The goal is to not make this cumbersome, but there is, it has evolved over time. You take a look at the IT manual, that has also evolved over time, trying to capture changes in market conditions. So I think we have a couple of discussion topics for this group. I think one would be just looking to get your input on your experience with the land use categories. Do you think they capture what you are seeing in terms of development in King County? Are there unique land uses that you've seen that are difficult to categorize relative to the uses listed in the ordinance? Should we take a different approach? Kind of going to open it up to the group for discussion. We know we've heard some feedback on this already, so I believe this is a hot topic.
Yeah, I'd like to say something. My name is Tony Lusenko, and I'm the director for the Elgin Development Group. We're the economic development group for the city of Elgin. And we've been looking at the impact fee for a number of years and had an opportunity to speak in front of the King County Jobs Committee and also the King County Department of Transportation group on this impact fee. And if it's okay, can I talk about just kind of our general overall opinion about this impact fee, or do you want to stick to talking about this table?
No, go ahead, Tony.
Okay, well, you know, we understand the reason behind the impact fee and why it began, and we appreciate that. We work closely with the city of Elgin, and we understand the need for infrastructure improvements. But I'd like to say from our experience in working with property owners and developers that this impact fee, regardless of the fee structure, is an impediment to development. And what I've seen over the years is large industrial, speculative, whatever kind of projects happening here in Elgin, and we had 1.6 million square feet of speculative projects happen and delivered last year. These owners and developers aren't building to create manufacturing facilities, but they're kind of leaning towards creating warehouse space, which doesn't create any jobs because of this table that's in front of you right now. I've literally seen their websites one day go from we're, here for anyone who wants to build or, come into Illinois and build a manufacturing facility to we're building a warehouse for distribution. And I've seen their websites and their marketing material change. What does that mean? They're bringing in building, 400,000 square foot buildings with floors that are not as thick as is required by most manufacturers, electrical and power that's not required for manufacturing, gas, water service, everything else, all built and designed strictly for warehousing. I thought that the reason we were trying to bring industrial development to Kane County was to create jobs. And I understand that, this is needed in order to fund infrastructure. However, it's time to come up with something different to fund infrastructure. And this particular type of impact fee, through its very, nature, we're only one of 2 counties in the entire state who has this fee, is already, it's past, it shouldn't exist anymore. It's an impediment to development. It does not create jobs. It actually makes us lose jobs in the state of Illinois. And my personal opinion, and those of people I speak to, we all think it just needs to go away. And I understand, I've worked on the municipal side of things, and I understand the need for infrastructure improvement. In fact, that's the #1 thing for economic development, but we just got to get it somewhere else, because everybody looks at this and they think, uh-oh, we're not going to do it in Kane County. So that's just my 2 cents.
So Tony, this is Jennifer Becker from KDOT. And I just like to say that thank you for your comments. And I remember the last iteration of this update, you spoke largely the same comments to the into the public hearing and at different meetings. And I think we've extended the invitation for you to, supply us with some empirical evidence so that we can analyze it and either respond to it or integrate it into the program. And I'd like to put it out there that, we're still welcoming those kinds of data sets or anything empirical that we can use to help craft a response to your comments. So whenever you'd like to provide that to us or meet with us, we'd be willing to do that. Thanks.
So this is Ken Franzese at Lee and Associates. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah.
Great. So I'm here, I'm a third-party commercial broker, but I also invest frequently with developers who are doing these speculative projects that Tony referred to. So I kind of can wear multiple hats at times. And I wanted to just back up what Tony said, and I want to explain some of the complexities or nuances that have made transacting very difficult with the way it's written. Certainly, if you look at the fee structure for warehousing, it's $539 per unit, which is like per 1,000 square feet. And so that is, as Tony mentions, that's for your kind of what we call boxes in, boxes out. You might have a 200,000 square foot warehouse with half a dozen forklift drivers. And so not a lot of job growth, and that's what they're paying. If there is any light assembly, and we've seen even in a part of the facility, then these developers are being assessed the alternative light industrial fee, which is $1,634. So it's over 300% higher. And these are the working environments that have higher jobs, higher paying jobs and more jobs. And so I agree with Tony in that we are kind of creating a negative process to attract better jobs to the area. And what's also happened is, from just a logistical standpoint, a developer will go in and prepay this initial warehousing fee, not knowing what the ultimate use is going to be. And then when the deal lands, they're suddenly faced with this additional $1,000 per 1,000 square feet. So, I mean, it's not like we're talking 5 or 10 or 20 grand. I mean, we're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars that suddenly becomes due and payable. So it's had a very negative impact on us, our ability to close some of these transactions. And and we can absolutely, I'll work with Tony to provide some empirical evidence and specific deals where this has occurred. The second part is, like I'll give you an example. There's a company right now, Colony Display, that's in Elgin that wants to expand. They're in about 270,000 square feet. They want to expand to about 350,000. So those jobs, their employees, they're already in the community and they're already impacting the roads. So now, and when they moved into their building, that building paid those fees. So now we're talking about trying to build a new building for them. And now they're going to get assessed all of these fees when those jobs and that traffic impact is already on the roads. And so you're shifting that burden to Colony when they move and expand. When that it just runs counterintuitive, because now their existing building, they can refill it, bring in the new jobs. The old building doesn't pay anything, and Colony basically paid these fees twice. So there's definitely problems with this structure. And I'll work with Tony to provide some specific examples for the board to look at. But when you compare this to some of the collar counties that are not charging impact fees, it makes our job way, way harder trying to get people's minds around it.
Ken and Tony, this is Tim Shargan with Kimley Horn. I certainly can relate to the perspective that you all have. I think one of the reasons that the county may have asked us to take this on is we have worked very closely with developers in the first 15 plus years of this program, in the implementation of it, and trying to identify, where some of those sticking points are, right? And we'll be talking about those more during this presentation, but really the purpose of this is to get the feedback on how we can make the program better, because if these fees are not clear and they become a surprise, as you mentioned, can later in the process, right? That can be very challenging for any developer, large or small, to deal with unexpected fees. There's a transparency element to this, to understand where they're going, and I think there's an opportunity to take our experience working on behalf of the development community in many cases with this program, combine that with the perspectives of this group and say, this is something that the county has made a decision to use as a mechanism to help fund infrastructure in the county. So how can we make this program more impactful, easier to understand, more transparent, so that those that are seeing this as just a negative can plan for it better, can see some of the benefits associated with it, and perhaps that then helps in the messaging that you all are doing as you're working with developers and others that are looking to be a part of growing Kane County. So that is what you guys have identified as what we are hoping to achieve as a part of the process, and that starts today. It's one of the reasons I believe, in Jen and Lisa and Jackie can say differently, but I think it's one of the reasons why we were asked to take this on, is because we do have some experience working there. I think I probably have my name on well over half of the individual assessments that have been done in the county, including Tony, the one that you all did in Elgin just this last year with Crow. So we understand that perspective. We want to make this program better, and want to work alongside you all to do so.
And Tim, we appreciate that very much. We understand the whole point of view, and we understand that you want to tweak this particular impact fee. But I think, from our perspective, I don't think tweaking goes far enough. I understand that you guys don't want to talk about that. Maybe we should bring that up with somebody else. But we're facing right now one of the largest projects in the state of Illinois we're working on right now, over $110 million project. And in front of me here, I've got a piece of paper asking me to approach different jurisdictions to try to waive particular fees, or they're seriously considering moving to Wisconsin. Now, how do I go about doing that? It's very difficult for me when I sit here. I've got several projects asking me to take a look at. fees that are not even anywhere else that we have here. If we could somehow restructure this particular type of program into something else, it's like a wall. You need to just remove it. And so if you can get that funding from some other sources, maybe you guys should maybe consider that. And that's all I'll say on the topic. I'll work with Mr. Francis on providing some empirical evidence, and I'll just be quiet. Thank you.
Yeah,
This
this
a
is,
question as well.
this,
Oh, I'm sorry.
well,
Yeah, I
this
just
is
wanted to
Tom Rickard.
Go ahead, Tom.
I'm not sure who's talking now, but yeah, I just wanted to reiterate what Tim was sharing. I mean, there's over the last 5-10 years, every time we've updated this, we've heard this from the development community, and it is our desire to fully understand it. To date, we've gotten no background information, and in fact, when we did meet with previously with chambers, it's primarily the Elgin Chamber, to discuss it, the primary concern was on the property tax and our help with seeing if there's ways that we can help with the differences, because property taxes were going sky high, and we've tried to do that every single time we've met. We've looked at new ways of approaching it, as well as with the individual assessment. I to date, I have no knowledge of a single company that has left the county because of the impact fee. So it's very important for us to at least get some background information, the empirical data, and just to be able to look at this, and also to be able to look at, are there some other alternatives, approaches to addressing the concern? It's simple to say that we should find other funding sources, but that is not this the reality that we address. We have so many needs because of the additional trips that continue to go onto the system, and we've done everything to date that we know of to try to look at ways of establishing discounts, ways to enhance and support industrial development. And we're, again, one of the reasons why we did hire Kimley Horn is that we really want to look at, are there additional ways we can do this? Again, in the past, we've asked for some assistance in this area, and we really haven't really gotten to the point where it sounds like we need to be. So Ken and Tony, we really do appreciate your involvement in this process to look at the various alternatives that might be in front of us.
Hey, chime in. We have a hand raised. I'm not sure.
It's me. Yeah, okay. It's me. So hi, my name's Scott Gerard. I'm the Vice President of Land Acquisition with Lennar Homes, which currently right now is the largest home builder and residential developer here in the Illinois market. You know, we did about 960 homes last year. And, you know, what I want to share with you guys is from our perspective, you know, this is a market that even when it was just a flat market was doing 15,000 permits a year. You know, in its peak, it was doing 35. Now we're doing 6,000. To put that in perspective, I spent 5 years in Columbus, Ohio with a 900,000 metro, and they do 6,000 permits a year. So when we're looking at Illinois, I'm going to tell you right now, Northwest Indiana is a legitimate thing. When we look at land right now, we are pumping all of our resources, a lot of them down into that market. A lot of the reasons being, one is tax, but two is impact fees. You know, the markets are extremely tight right now. Trying to continue to add fees is really going to take away business from you guys, and quite frankly, residential communities as a whole. We spend the majority of our time in Illinois, and we've done a lot of development here in the last 2 or 3 years. But every single one of those deals was a trade, was working with the city to reduce their fees in order to make it happen. And there are certain municipalities that we don't even look at right now because their fees are so high that we know that we cannot make those deals pencil. At the end of the day, this is not a land-driven market right now. The land prices have not gone up. The problem is you've got materials, you've got labor, and you've got a market that hasn't appreciated in 15 years. I mean, if you look at the Burns data, you're still red dot. There are other markets that are already going full circle into the cycle and starting to peak down. We never left. So again, I urge you guys, you know, we have a lot of residential ground out here, right? I mean, we have a lot of opportunities, a lot of different counties, a lot of different municipalities that we can do our business in. And again, I would urge you guys to really consider, what it is that you guys are doing from an impact standpoint, because again, we spend a majority of our time getting them reduced in order to make a deal pencil. And that's really all I've got to comment on.
Thank you, Scott. That's actually a good.
And this
segue.
is, this is Ken Francis again. Sorry, I just wanted to add one last comment that has really caused some confusion. And again, I'm speaking on behalf of a half a dozen different active developers out there that I've chatted with prior to this call and said that I would articulate the concern. Since and most of this involves property right off of Randall Road, which is a limited use highway. And the one of the things that's very confusing and frustrating for these developers is the fact that there is the impact fee, right, which is to contribute to our much needed roadways and the maintenance of them. And so understanding that and accepting that, there also seems to be, when there's access being provided to a new property, there's the impact fees, but then there's also an expectation, if you will, of an open checkbook that whatever else is required in terms of improvements to Randall Road, that the developer has to go along with that, whether that's the addition of a third lane or it's other nearby improvements that the developer, is to pay or contribute to that, not just in the terms of a land contribution. I get that part, and I'm not bringing that up. I'm not making an issue of that, but it's this open checkbook concern. And we're facing one that's actually in West Dundee with on the former Galvin property, that there's an extensive amount of improvements, and it has thwarted any forward movement in that development because of the scalability of those costs. And so I think it's really important that, yes, would I love the impact fee to go away? 100%. I think that clears it out. If we find another way to collect that revenue for KDOT and keep our roads, in good shape. But if there is an impact fee, there can't be this perceived double dip that it's the impact fee plus whatever else may come up for your particular development. So I wanted to just voice that as well, and I'll try to give you some specific examples because it's not just this West Dundee property where it's come up, but I'll work with Tony and we'll get that information to you.
Yeah, and if we can also talk about that too, because almost every example that I've seen in the last 5 years, whenever there are those types of capacity type improvements, those are all credited to the impact fee program. It's not an open checkbook. In fact, if anything, those types of improvements with the impact fee program and actually have gone down. And so I think it's important that we talk about that and understand some of the development activities that are going on. I've always said to every developer, make sure you come and talk to us about it, because it seems like there's a lot of information going around that doesn't follow the actual ordinance, and there's assumptions going on. And so we will always be glad to meet with the developer and talk to them what the expectations are.
That'd be great.
Yeah, thank you for that input. I think that's a good segue. We did want to highlight, the county over the years has worked to create flexibility in the program. There are a number of tools that are used. Discounts are applied for residential based on features of the proposed development. There are exemptions, as we talked about earlier. Credits for demolition, and as Tom mentioned, for offsite improvements that are being installed as a part of the development, and obviously payment plans too. So the county has been working towards creating some flexibility in the program. I think as a part of this update, as Tim and Tom mentioned, we are working towards making sure that flexibility is transparent, that those conversations, like Tom mentioned, are happening. And if there are changes to the toolbox, that's a conversation we're interested in having. I will say the discounts that are available for, particularly for the residential development, those tools are closely aligned with the goals of the long-range transportation plan. So I know many of the municipalities on this call were actively engaged in that recent update. And so part of this exercise is to make sure the program continues to align with that long-range plan. I am going to launch a quick poll to get some input on, as I mentioned, the discounts align with the long-range transportation plan, but we also recognize municipalities and developers have priorities as a part of your local organization. So want to get some input on which discounts you think are most important to the organization you represent. And then also I'll kind of open it up to the group for discussion as people are completing the poll. Interested to get some thoughts based on your experience, if you think these discounts align with your local priorities, but also kind of support the priorities that the county has identified, and which include redevelopment, infill, downtown, and affordable housing. Also curious to get the group's thoughts on if there are opportunities to restructure these discounts to better align with the priorities. And it looks like we've got some polling results now. So I'll open it up to the group. It looks like infill and redevelopment are priorities, as well as density and mixed use. Do you think the tools that are currently available in the ordinance support these priorities that you've identified? Or are there ideas on how we can better structure the discounts and exemptions and credits?
This is Rich Garrard. I handle mostly residential developments in the county as far as a developer and an attorney. One comment I wanted to make, it's not directly on point to this, but to be thought about, is we have occasions where, in one case now, we're working on a residential project where it's all going to be paying county impact fees, but our main expense is going to be a $2 million expansion of an intersection for really IDOT that we're not going to receive any credit for, as far as I know. So I understand that that doesn't fit in the system right now in the way it has it, but it is something that directly impacts us, that often we might spend millions on infrastructure that benefits more than just our project, but we really have no way to get any credit for it from the county that I'm aware of. So I don't expect an answer right now, but I just wanted to put out that for consideration, that there might be some balancing factors.
Thank you for that comment. That's very helpful. Other comments on how these discounts do or don't align, or I guess the program in general align with priorities in your community or organization? Quick overview. As a part of this update, we're taking a look at the program, the administration of the program, and opportunities to make some changes. I think we've heard a little bit about just transparency and partnership with the both municipal side and development community. So that's something we're looking for your input on, ways that we can improve our transparency and communication. I think also there's an element of the tools, making sure that those conversations, to Ken's point earlier, that there are no surprises at occupancy, that the tools are available for all parties to be informed at the start of the process. The individual assessment, we'll kind of talk a little bit about that, taking a look at whether or not that makes sense and is the right approach, or if there are changes that we should be making. And then obviously currently KDOT staff has an annual reporting obligation, looking at ways we can improve that. So I want to kind of move through this quickly, being sensitive to time, but we've kind of touched on the individual assessment. We had a polling question in here to get your input on, but we'll skip over. I just wanted to share it with you because it'll bring a little bit of fun to the meeting. Not intelligence artificial. I guess I'm curious, based on your experiences, what is the most common source of an individual assessment? We have a couple of options: grocery store, age-restricted housing, industrial, and animal hospital. As we mentioned before, the individual assessment is for unique development, requires a higher level of analysis to capture the unique trip generation characteristics. And this one, we've got a split age-restricted housing and industrial. It's actually industrial. And part of that, I think, is we've heard a lot about industrial and just the unique characteristics of different types of industrial buildings. And since the last update, ITE has modified the trip generation for industrial, trip generation land use categories for industrial. It's been expanded significantly. They've recognized the changes in the industrial market. I think that's something, obviously, based on the input we've received today and just based on the market, something that we'll be looking at as a part of this update, and anxious to continue the conversation after today and get input on what makes sense moving forward. So administration, streamlining the administration of the program is a big piece of this update, and making sure that not only the public has the tools, but also KDOT staff has the tools. On average, how many individual assessments is the county processed annually? This one will be interesting. Share the results. The correct answer is actually 2. And I think this gets to Tom's previous comments about kind of some assumptions or conversations that are happening in the public realm that we need to have a little bit more transparency and direct communication with KDOT. There's actually only 2 individual assessments processed on average each year since the program inception. So the program, the fee structure, by and large, is working. The discounts are working. There are some developments that do require additional review and a unique approach, but generally, the program has been implemented effectively. All right, so we're going to skip ahead in the interest of time and talk a little bit about best practices. As a part of this exercise, not only are we looking locally and soliciting input from you all, but also looking around the country at what's happening with impact fees, how they're addressing changing market trends, how they're addressing the economic development component. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jeff to share some of his national perspective.
Before we dive into that, Rory, we did get a question from the Elgin Chamber regarding annual reporting and the expenditures and how those are reported. I don't know if that's something that KDOT staff wants to answer, but the question is, how does annual reporting include expenditure by municipality, or is it just the 3 areas? Does the data show how much is contributed to each area? My understanding, and feel free to jump in, Jackie or others, but my understanding is the annual reporting does identify the projects and the expenditures by the 3 service areas. I don't know if there is specificity in the annual reporting on municipalities, but my understanding is it does identify the projects and the overall expenditure by area.
I took a quick look at our annual report that we have posted since the beginning of the projects or beginning of the program, and we are showing how much we collect per service area, the interest that's earned on that, the administrative fees, if any, the total earnings, and then what has been expended so far. However, it does not list by individual project. That is something that Jeff will kind of get into this a little bit in his presentation, but some of the things that he has seen that may be something we can consider. Those are available on our impact fee website. There is a link to that at the end of this presentation, and then you can look under annual reports to see that. Thanks.
Thanks, Jackie.
Thanks, Tim. I'll start with the best practices with an introduction. My name's Jeff Whitaker. I predominantly focus on capital improvement plans and impact fees. I've had the opportunity to work on about 40 municipalities and agencies on impact fees in 4 different states. So I was asked to come on here and just take a glance at what Kane County is doing. And the first thing I look for is some of the general transparency things and understanding the program that could be out there. Does the community have a procedures manual? When I Google Kane County impact fees, is there a website that pops up that has some resources for me to use? And is the program looking to evolve? When I looked at those 3 items for Kane County, I put a check by those because there is a procedures manual, there's a website, and the program has evolved in roughly 15, 16 years that it's been there. As mentioned earlier, there was involvement on service areas, there was involvement around industrial, there's been several involvements over the life of the program. So those are 3 of the positive things when I looked at it that I thought Kane County was doing today. So then I really got into the next slide is project themes. So when I think of impact fees, I really think of best practices, and I just put them into 3 buckets. Simplicity, is it user friendly? Predictability, can any person interested in economic development understand the program? I echo what Tom said. It's always best to talk to the agency, but in some cases there's not time to talk to them or they haven't talked to them, but can they get an easy, accurate estimate? Is it visible? Some of the questions that was just brought up, are we publicizing the impact fee funded infrastructure projects in a way that people understand where the dollars are being utilized? So these are the project themes that I think of when I think of an impact fee from best practice: simplicity, predictability, and visibility. So for simplicity, what do I mean on that is, I think at the root of what an impact fee program is what are we trying to accomplish and what is trying to be understood? It's really the cost per trip. So when a question's asked, I heard some questions on industrial earlier about expanding. Are they generating new trips? What is the cost per trip? So getting back to the actual cost per trip and what is actually being generated. And why is that important? It really adds that administrative flexibility. In a lot of communities, we're basing a lot of our information on the IT trip generation manual, which is the screenshot I showed there. Data is changing, the world's evolving. If it's really based on the cost per trip and you have that documented, it allows administrative flexibility where you may not have to go through one of those IAs, potentially, if you know what those trips are. I put a screenshot up here of another community's cost per trip, and it has a few more land uses. I think one of the questions were age restricted housing. Well, the IT manual now has pretty good information on age restricted housing. So if you're really thinking about cost per trips, you'll know that information up front and it's predictable. And even though it may not be on your table, but if it's in the IT manual, the administrative flexibility might be there to allow an administrative interpretation off the manual. So that's what we see a lot of common themes of the simplicity of the program, is really understanding how the formula is calculated and how to apply that formula. Tim, did you have something you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think this is one of the things that, working with the private sector development community that often has been a tripping point. And that is, somebody mentioned a building expansion that won't necessarily result in new trips. How can that be administered and how can the impact of that be quantified? Because really this program is all about making sure that the additional trips that are generated on the county's network can be accommodated, and there's funding available to make the improvements that are needed to accommodate them, not just in the local intersection or access point, but also more broadly. So and one of the things that we may have an opportunity to do here is to make this process that tends to be, I think, perhaps a little bit opaque, more transparent, that could allow for additional understanding, additional simplicity, and perhaps a more rapid way of addressing these particular things, whether it's industrial or some other types of uses. But also it helps with, this is a changing world with transit and walking and all the different things that many people want to do and believe are important. And again, if we can make this be more trip focused and bring that forward, it may allow for more simplicity on both sides, both for the development community and those involved in supporting them, as well as the county staff.
Thank you, Tim. The next topic that we're going to dive into a little bit is predictability. One of the case studies I'm going to kind of walk through is the city of Fort Worth. It's actually where I live, and I had the reason I chose that city is their program started about the same year that Kane County started, and it's evolved. But also more importantly, I've actually worked on it, and I've been on the implementation. I actually run all the appeals. They call them appeals in Fort Worth. They're similar to your IAs. I review all those that come through the city of Fort Worth. So I have a really good idea of just how another community is handling situations and similar questions that we heard from the folks on this call. But the first thing is impact fees should be easily calculated. That's the predictability side. One of the things that we try to do in the communities is get some sort of spreadsheet that someone can estimate. It's all an estimate because some of the items, the discounts, et cetera, you have to figure out, but most cities have the same common examples. Most communities have the same common examples of there's an impact fee multiplier. In most roadway impact fees, that is pretty common. In the case of Kane County, it's 50%. There's an impact fee multiplier. Some communities have specific land uses with a different multiplier. It's fairly common across the states and communities I've worked in that residential, non-residential might have different multipliers. Now, every state statutes different legal interpretations, but that's something that is common. The multiplier in general is common. What we see is the discounts is less common. Mixed use is pretty common. I think the reason mixed use is really common, it goes back to the trips. The impact fee program is to really capture the number of trips, and mixed use does have an impact in lowering the amount of trips. That's pretty common. The other common thing that we typically see is when other discounts, it's usually on established boundaries. If a community has a downtown, they might have a discount established to this specific area or something like that. One thing I'll point out on this fee is the city of Fort Worth, a large community, has 3 discounts that they have in their disposal, and it's built into the spreadsheet, and people can kind of figure out how they get the discount. And then there's which you don't see here, there's a tab that describes these discounts in the actual Excel spreadsheet. So they can in here and they can calculate it, and then they can obviously reach out to the city, as we would encourage them to make sure that they understand. But there's a way to have some predictability and some comfort that they're calculating it correctly.
And I think this is a big one. Most of my experience working with the private sector community is getting a phone call and saying, hey, can you help me understand what this fee is actually going to be? And even in some of the more simple land uses, understanding service areas and discounts and all of those types of things and multipliers can be challenging for someone that hasn't worked in Kane County before. And so is there an opportunity for us to be able to provide a calculator, a way to estimate this initially, that then allows during the due diligence phase, during pro forma development, a better, more clear understanding of what the fees could be, so that can feed into the development decisions, and do that in a little bit way that's a little bit more user friendly. And could that help the development community better? Can we provide them with a better tool to do that? And so that's something that we're seeing. Jeff has mentioned Fort Worth, but he was showing us stuff from different places, and it's certainly something that is a tool that other communities frequently use, and so maybe something that could be added to our toolbox here in King County.
The next is visibility. And I think this will cover one of the questions I heard earlier. A lot of just understanding where the program dollar is. That's having worked about half my career on the private side. A lot of times the question I get is, okay, how's my money being applied? How am I using it? And just having the visibility of where the projects are being used. The top example shows the specific projects that are going and what areas and how much funding from the impact fee program is actually being used on those projects. I'm also tracking it. This is just an example about how much funds were collected in 6 months in a community in their service areas. A lot of cities, the other is also use of discounts. I think a lot of times there's a lot of discussion on what we've noticed. A lot of times when we do the first impact fee, when we're doing a review or an update, we always try to track like how often is that discount being used, or is it written right? Is it accomplishing the goals it's supposed to accomplish? I think that's an important thing to understand. If you're applying a discount, is it really accomplishing the goals? And one of the communities I worked at, they had a discount that no one was applying for, and it wasn't accomplishing the goals. I actually just go back to Fort Worth. They had an economic development discount that had never been used. It was actually used one time by American Airlines headquarters, but that was the only time it had been used in 10 years or 15 years. So they decided to relook at that. but just what is the use of those discounts, and highlight the impact fee funded projects. I think that's important just to make sure that it's, as we mentioned, as we'll talk about in a little bit, is these monies are being used on projects throughout the county. So it's good to make sure that the people who are paying these fees understand where they're being used. So just an example of visibility to get a little more into the weeds is in Fort Worth, they did a strategy of signs. So when it was out there, when the project was being built, they showed the funding sources. And I think that, as you probably realize, the CRIP, that the project list known as the CRIP in Kane County is relatively large. It takes a lot of different sources to fund that project. So that pie chart of actually funding all the needs in Kane County is relatively large. And I think, as Rory mentioned earlier, collecting $43 million over the program is a large amount of money. And that's one of the pieces of the pie. So when you think about the visibility, it takes all these efforts, all these funds collected to actually formulate that CRIP. But impact fees are just a sliver of that pie. And so it's really a partnership and a visibility of showing that all these pieces are coming together. Not just growth is not the only element paying. If growth doesn't pay for that piece of pie, then the money would have to come from somewhere else. So that's just important to remember of how that other project doesn't get built, one or the other. So that's just an important thing to remember as you start thinking about impact fees. So I think Rory had a polling question is, based on just a brief presentation that we gave you about some of the best practices that you see, what do you think would be most impactful to Kane County's program? Is it a simplified calculation? Is it an online estimator? Is it administrative flexibility? Or is it promoting the impact fee benefits?
Well, if you all complete the polling, thank you, Jeff, for sharing some perspective. I think it'll be important as we move forward to continue the conversation with Jeff based on the feedback we received today and upcoming conversations, that all this gets folded together so that we can move forward. Based on the input of the poll, it looks like administrative flexibility would be most positively impactful to the program. So we'll certainly keep that in mind. And there's a lot of interest also in the impact fee calculator, as Tim and Jeff mentioned. That's definitely a common theme across existing programs outside of Illinois as well. So thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
We will try to wrap this up quickly and be sensitive to time. Just wanted to put a quick plug. The intent of today is to start the discussion with you all. We are grateful for your participation today. This is by state statute about a year-long process to update the impact fee program. We are underway. We've solicited some input on the land use assumptions from the different municipalities. Those assumptions will move forward to the Impact Fee Advisory Committee on March 5th for review. And then there's a process for the county board ultimately to approve those assumptions. Those assumptions will be used to inform our travel demand model, which helps us to determine where there are deficiencies in the roadway network and then ultimately identify the projects for the CRIP. Your input and participation in this process is critical, as I think is very evident in the conversation today. You all have experience with the program. You know what is working, you know what's not. Please continue the conversation. If it means participating in the upcoming meetings and that works with your schedule, please do. If it is a one-on-one conversation with county staff, please reach out. We would love to hear more. We are really focused on trying to make this a more user-friendly program and make the changes that need to be made for all users. So again, next steps will be proceeding with the land use assumptions on March 5th. You are welcome to attend. And then the land use assumptions will move forward through the approval process. Simultaneously, we'll be working on the travel demand model, which will ultimately inform the CRIP. Any input on that CRIP, there'll be multiple points along the way where we're soliciting input on potential projects. But again, kind of some of the nuances on policies and procedures, we'll be soliciting input along the way throughout the next year. So I've included Jackie Forbes' contact information on the screen. Please reach out to her if you'd like to continue the discussion privately. We're very interested in hearing how we can make this program better. There is a wealth of information on KDOT's website dating back to program inception. So please take a look if you are one of those that responded that you're less familiar with the program. Please take a look, or again, reach out and we can walk through it together. Any questions from the group? Or Tim, did I miss something?
I think, we've got a lot of different perspectives on the line, and in this, last 30 minutes we have together, I'm just kind of interested in kind of understanding, as a part of this update, are there particular tools that we can provide to this group that would make it easier to understand the program, understand the benefits, raise awareness of projects that are being used or funded by these programs? One of the things that Jeff had shown in some other communities was, an online mapping tool that allowed for the identification of programs or projects that are being funded by this with some level of spatial perspective that could allow a community to be able to show a developer, hey, yeah, when we're talking about impact fees, there's the dollar amount, but here's 5 intersections in the area that have been recently improved by impact fees that the traffic associated with this particular development will be able to take advantage of. There's just some different things that we want to understand, knowing that there may be opposition to the use of impact fees generally, and that's kind of a separate policy conversation. But if the program stays, how can we make it better? How can we equip you all with the tools you need to understand it within your organizations, to share it with those that are coming into your communities or exploring growth in Kane County? Because that's what this is about. How do we make this better, and understanding what you all are looking for us to do as a part of this update?
Are you taking questions at this point?
Yes.
I have a question I had was, sorry, I'm Steve Kaminsky with Mackey Consultants. I'm a consulting engineer. I was curious, it appears the way that the fees are assessed right now is almost entirely tied to the building square footage. Am I under the correct impression there?
Yes, that's correct. It's calculated based on square footage or unit.
So the individual assessment is only if the applicant requests it. That's the only time an individual assessment happens?
That is correct. It happens at the request of the applicant.
The only reason I comment is, first of all, a slightly different perspective as a Kane County resident. I appreciate the idea of an impact fee as a way to make the folks that are creating new traffic partially offset the costs that are imposed on the rest of us. I think I moved to Kane County from Cook County, and I saw a very significant difference in my residential real estate taxes lower by moving from Cook to Kane, in spite of it being a somewhat nicer house. So I really understand the theory behind it, but I do wonder if you've looked at ways of a sense of that are more accurate than merely tying things to building square footage to assess the actual numbers of trip generated, especially in the industrial realm. There are some industrial uses that really have very little to do with the building size. Have you looked at that at all?
I think that is one of the things that, while it's happening behind the scenes now, Stephen, it's using ITE trip generation associated with that square footage variable or that unit variable. There isn't kind of an easy to see tie between that variable in trips. And so you're spot on. It can be hard to understand why one particular use is generating a fee compared to another when it seems like the variable isn't really tied to that. So our hope in one of the things that we wanted to explore based on some of those best practices is, does it make sense to bring that component forward so there is a better understanding of the connection between the use, the trips that it will generate, and then the associated fee, so that becomes more visible.
And then as a follow-up in terms of the clarity, because one of the parts of transparency, as you mentioned, is clarity and simplicity. Why is it presented with a gross impact fee, but then the multiplier, which is somewhere around 50%? I mean, it strikes me as very similar to the college tuition. I call it a game, where here's your tuition, and oh, but here's your scholarship, and by the way, everybody gets offered a scholarship. Why not just be more upfront with what the fees are and simplify it?
Now, I think that, in the past, when we first developed the fees, the municipalities actually came to us and said, can we look at a reduction? And so the multiplier was created in order to assist with some of the concerns with the actual costs per trip. And so that's why it was created. I do think that it is something that we want to explore based upon our comments relative to simplicity, because it does potentially create some confusion. But again, historically, politically, on the county's part, as well as on the municipal part, it showed the reduction, the consideration of the overall costs. And so it is something we are going to look at.
One thing I'll show from a natural perspective, just because I've seen the multiplier in other cities, is roadways are really expensive. I've dealt with impact fees on water and wastewater, and sometimes a meter size doesn't have the same impact fee. We're talking about roadways. Roads can get really expensive, but a lot of times the multiplier is, if you read some of the whereas clause on why people are using multipliers, like if you write an ordinance and say whereas, it's whereas we recognize other benefits of development. So we've built in an automatic discount is really what the multiplier is, but it's recognized. Most cities, if you read those whereas clause, when they do a multiplier, it's basically to what other people are saying, other discounts, and it's really just the true cost of a trip would be without that multiplier from the results of the study. So that's just another perspective.
Thank you. That makes more sense. I really liked the idea of the online calculator, sort of a TurboTax approach to potentially reduce some of the sticker shock scare away things that may be happening without you ever even realizing it. I think there are some people that do quick scans of real estate, do a pro forma with a pencil and a calculator on the back of a napkin and go, oh my God, I'm not going to build there, without ever spending the kind of time that it takes to drill into what it actually would cost them based on the site specific reality. So the idea of the online calculator, a TurboTax approach, if you will, I thought was a really good one. Thank you.
This is Rich Garrard. Just kind of reaffirming, I was on a couple of the committees that for Kane County where they're required to review the impact fees every so many years. And that is what happened, is the fees were set on the calculated costs, the actual costs, and the impact fee reduction or multiplier was really a negotiated item that was presented each time and adjusted each time. So it probably isn't that easy to get rid of it, because the fees were really based on an objective estimate of costs. But anyway, that's a little of the history.
Thank you. Are there other questions, comments, observations?
Yeah, this is Scott Buning with the City of Batavia. Getting back to the chart and the uses, I think two things I would say is, I think, to echo some of the things that were talked about earlier, the warehousing versus the manufacturing numbers, there's a double-edged sword. If we level them out and just make it one use, that's going to make the warehousing pay more potentially. But at the same time, I think, that may be a kind of a social engineering thing where we want to encourage manufacturing because that brings jobs and the most benefit for the area. So I'm kind of leaning towards, suggesting that would be, merged into one category of sorts. But again, there's impacts by doing that. The other thing I would note is, I think that gas stations and convenience stores, and I think I've said this in the past, but I think those numbers are awfully high. I think they're kind of skewed to just the trips that are generated. But I think there's that assumption that those are generating trips as opposed to that they're mostly pass-by trips. I mean, people are not typically going to the gas station specifically for that purpose or the convenience store for that purpose. They're usually doing that on the way to do something else. So I think those numbers are skewed awfully high, with the impact fees because of that.
Thank you, Scott. We've had some conversations about pass-by trips and how that gets folded in. So I anticipate that will be a continued discussion.
And potentially to the transparency thing, Scott, externalizing some of the assumptions that are made in the calculation, so that, should they be adjusted by, some of the national standards, it becomes less of an administrative headache to deal with those. And that's true for industrial as well. It seems like every 6 months, IT is coming out with a new supplement with just reflecting the changing world of industrial and e-commerce and all the different things that are going on there. We want to at least explore having flexibility without individual assessments for everything, to address some of those changes as they occur over the life of the program, because certainly many sectors of the economy, but particularly that one, are very dynamic right now.
Right, thank you.
Other comments from the group? This is what we're looking for. Other land uses that you've encountered that have been somewhat challenging and unique, and any trends in your local municipality or organization that you're seeing that we should be mindful of moving forward?
Hi, this is Scott Gerard again. So Rich is my father. So if the last names throw you off, that's why. But the other thing I think you got to realize is, I hear a lot on the industrial, I hear a lot on the commercial side of things. Again, not a lot of conversation on the residential side, at least in this particular meeting. But you got to keep in mind that 10, 15, 20 years ago, again, 75, 80% of this market was owned by private guys who land bank stuff, sat on it, waited for the market to come, and they build communities. 85% of this market is controlled by public builders who are unable to do that. So, to my dad's point earlier, I think there needs to be some conversation about if you're doing major improvements to a county road that impacts more than just your community as a whole, there needs to be some consideration for that. Because I have to underwrite that thing and carry that cost up front, and it kills the deal. I heard another gentleman talk about back of the napkin performance. That's exactly what we do. And when we have a $3 million road improvement that we've got to put out front before we have any revenue coming back in, plus all the internal developments, the numbers don't work. So I think a bigger, at least, advantage or a bigger thing to look at is really, if we have substantial KDOT improvements, why are we paying an impact fee? We've just built it out. I think you guys need to talk more to the residential side of things. Again, I'm not kidding when I'm saying, we're looking everywhere, guys. 6,000 permits. We're building a lot in McHenry. We're building a lot in Will and Kendall. We've got a couple in Kane County. I'd love more. I lived there for years. I love Kane County. But again, Northwest Indiana is, I mentioned it earlier, is not a joke. We're going to be up to 500 homes there in the next 3 or 4 years because it is the same distance to St. Charles, to Chicago. It's probably a little bit less. So even when, again, commercial follows that, industrial follows that, they have access to 65, they can get to Indy. Again, guys, you're going to lose business unless, we start to change how we do things. And again, I'll leave it at that. I'll be more than happy to sit with the county and explain our perspective in greater detail off this call.
Yeah, Scott, I was just going to say that I appreciate the comments. I think and unless I understood or misunderstood previous from Rich, it sounded like that the primary concern was if there were other entities requiring significant improvements, because I know we credit anything that we require. So it sounds like the concern was with like if IDOT or municipality required some type of significant improvement.
Yeah, that's
Am I
Tom, you hit it.
understanding wrong?
You hit it. Yep. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. You hit it on the head. We have 30 buckets, 40 buckets, right? So we've got fees from the city we've got to take care of, right? Impact fees there from the school, from the park district, from the library. Then you've got KDOT. It all begins to add up to the point to where it just doesn't pencil. When you start hitting into a total impact fee of all those things involved, right?
Okay.
You're talking 20,000. I've seen some up to $35,000. I'll tell you right now, I won't even look in a town that has a $30,000 to $35,000 impact fee because I know I can't make it work. I mean, I think the one thing that everyone's forgetting about this market is that, again, on the residential side, we had 40,000 developed home sites sitting on the ground when the market just blew up, right? And so no one's really been that concerned about these fees and these costs, like I just mentioned, you know, with putting in road improvements and everything else, because they haven't had to in 10 or 15 years. And in most markets that are strong, you know, you're going to get that appreciation every single year. So the market will absorb those costs. That has not happened here. People like myself have been buying properties for 30 cents on the dollar, 40 cents on the dollar. When, you know, today, for example, I've got ground that I paid $15,000 a developed home site for. If I had to go replace that today, it'd be $70,000 on cost. So again, it's all these buckets. So, you know, I can't control the materials, labor, and everything else. I mean, it is kind of what it is. You know, it's going to cost me the same amount of money to develop a home site in King County from just a pure hard cost as it is in McHenry County. It's the buckets outside of that is what really makes the difference on whether or not we can make a deal work.
All right, thanks, Scott.
I think that the comments that we've received in the discussion, this has just been so valuable to us. I've been writing everything down to try and capture, even though we're recording. And I want to say thanks to all of you that are, you know, just giving some frank feedback to us, because, you know, we administer the program on a daily basis, and knowing your perspectives is going to help us craft, you know, a better outcome for this iteration of the impact fees. So thank you very much, everybody, for giving your expertise to us.
This is Rich. I just want to mention one more thing, just for future consideration when you're working on structuring these things. What helped dramatically was paying these impact fees at a permit or time of permit. Initially, when it was first proposed and you had to pay everything up at the time of plat, it's a dramatic impact on a subdivision that has to carry those costs from the beginning to the end. So anything that you come up with, or any structure, or any idea that extends or allows these to be paid over time, or has some way to tie the cost of the fee to the actual time when it's being used, is a dramatic help to a residential builder.
Thanks, Rich.
Any other questions or comments from the group?
I would echo Rich Garrard's comments that it's not just residential, institutional, manufacturing, industrial, all of those guys. The most difficult part is the upfront, when they have to come up with the upfront money. And so the closer they can tie expenditures to the beginning of a generation of revenue is an enormous help.
Yeah, hey Steve, I'll jump on that. It's Scott Garrard. I mean, that's our biggest killer, guys. You know, one, you know, recaptures are nice and everything else, but when I'm doing my underwriting or performance, I can't even assume that. I can never assume that a recapture is going to happen. So any upfront cost that we can push back is going to help that IRR. At the end of the day, I could love the project and I think it can do amazing things, but if it doesn't hit our minimum thresholds financially, and that's not just us, that's basically every company that's going in there and doing deals from residential to industrial to commercial, it just doesn't work. I mean, it's so systemized now that here are your thresholds, here are the financials, you need to have X amount of margin, you need to have X amount of IRR. And if you don't get it, it's see you later. And in a lot of these deals, the margin's there, but your IRR is just crushed with all these upfront costs and you just can't make it up.
This is Tony Lusenko in Elgin. I just wanted to thank the King County Department of Transportation for this opportunity to give some input. We'll provide you with some empirical evidence here shortly.
Thank you, Tony. And that goes for everyone. If you have a story or question after today's meeting that you'd like to share, please reach out to Jackie. We can schedule one-on-one conversations or review specific projects, anything that you feel would be beneficial to this update process. We are all ears. So thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah.
We have these materials will be uploaded on our website. We're recording this session. We'll upload that as well. And the materials that we've done so far, as far as our Impact Fee Advisory Committee, if you are interested more in the history of the Impact Fee Program, you can look at the PowerPoint from that meeting, or if you want to listen to the recording or watch it, that we really dove into the program there. So if you're looking for that, it is available now, and then we'll get this up in the next few days. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Have a great day all.
Yeah, have a great rest.